Hello, hello. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome back to the Virtual Vaults, the home of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of America here on YouTube. I have a sort of an unusual and I would rather say special little brief session today. As you can tell by the title below, it's an exciting day here in the US for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. We are going to be debuting a selection of casks for the Spirit of Speyside Festival. So a couple of things to start. First of all, you can tell I'm by myself and without my trusty friends and colleagues to join me in sharing this tasting. It'll be a bit different. So it's just me today. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really unlike any tasting we've had so far here on YouTube. So just quickly rewind. Obviously, if you're watching this live, you know the situation we're in with this global pandemic going on. And just mention that in case you're catching the replay. And because of this pandemic, the festivals that take place in May in Scotland have been canceled. And so maybe just to rewind a little bit, what are the festivals? What are we doing? What are we to be tasting? How does this all relate to the whiskey today? So the festivals every year, every May is in Scotland. All the various regions of Scotland, the whiskey producing regions, hold these celebratory festivals. And it's, in my opinion, always the best party taking place in Scotland every year. Tons of whiskey lovers flock to Scotland to taste the whiskeys released by the distilleries, share and often song and dance, celebrating the history and heritage of these regions. And it's an incredible party. And interestingly, the society, we've been involved in these celebrations for the various regions for years now. And really one of the few, if not the only for a time, non-distilling sort of whiskey company. Of course, we're a club, but to really take on the festivals and offer our own special bottlings. So it's a unusual circumstance because with the global pandemic, it's not taking place. However, after thinking about it in this current situation, we decided we can either sit at home and do nothing about it, or we can sort of bring the party online. And so here we are today with the official release of our Spirit of Speyside Festival bottling. So real quick, just want to thank you all for joining in. I know it seems like the group's building up real quickly. Just want to say a quick shout out to everybody. Sipsy Russell's first in as always. Hey, Sipsy. George, cheers. Good to see you. Michael Epstein is in the house. Good to see you, Michael. Bruce Dunn says, good morning from Dallas, Texas. Bruce, good morning from Chicago. Yes, it is still morning here. It's just after 11 a.m. in Chicago, which means I will officially be drinking this whiskey in the morning, which is, I don't do it often, but it's interesting because technically, you may have heard of this before, but when you taste in the morning, your palate is generally fresher. And I think your ability to sort of pick out different flavors and aromas is really heightened in the morning. So we'll put that to the test. But good to see everybody in. Matthew J. Ryan is in the house. Neil Bruce, good afternoon. Good morning for me. Good afternoon to you. Zach Kemble and Jenna are both in the house. Dudley, good afternoon to you as well. So got a good group, and I think really got an exciting selection here. And so what we'll do, we'll keep this one brief. In recent streams, I've been joined by my colleagues, and we've really enjoyed having a great discussion along with introducing some of the whiskeys. I'll share a little bit about the whiskeys, and I have to just say that of the ones we'll be tasting today, I have only tasted one of them in advance. So the other one will be sort of a first time in real time impression. And so let's just get into it. So starting at 1 o'clock today, which is now less than 1 hour, we'll be releasing a selection of whiskeys for the Spirit of Speyside Festival. And we did post that, and we'll repost again this in the caption below. I'll include the whole schedule of the future releases. But the Spirit of Speyside Festival is first, beginning today. And Speyside, it's interesting. Why are we celebrating Speyside? What is it? What does it mean to us as whiskey lovers, as society members? And when I think about Speyside, I'll just share briefly my thoughts on it. I think in many respects, it's probably the most important region for the Scotch whiskey industry today. And this is just an opinion, but when you think of Scotch whiskey, and go back to the time when you first started getting into Scotch whiskey, what are some of the brands or distilleries that you became familiar with? Most of them are I would argue, of the top 5 are likely in Speyside. The big Glens, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, perhaps Balvenie, Macallan. These are some big global brands at this point, all from Speyside. So I think that just based on the presence of these bigger brands, Speyside has really put Scotch whiskey on the map for a lot of us, at least here in the U.S. And I know my first whiskeys from Scotland were from Speyside. And, it's interesting because for a period of time, as I got deeper and deeper into whiskey, or my interest in Scotch whiskey, I sort of, I don't want to say I discounted Speyside, but I've moved away from it in terms of the whiskeys I was actually exploring. I sort of focused on some of the bigger, bolder flavors of the islands, some more obviously I don't want to say surface level impressive, but really sort of just the bolder styles that were very different from the more delicate and nuanced subtlety, elements of Speyside whiskeys. And it was really only until probably the past few years, perhaps when I joined the team here at the Society and had a chance to go over to Scotland for the first time, that I really started then embracing Speyside and Speyside whiskeys in particular, more than I have ever before. So for me personally, I have such a love for Speyside. I think going there has changed things dramatically. Unbelievable country, beautiful country. And at this point, it is the largest whiskey producing region in Scotland, with I think over 50 distilleries to date. So it's massive, and they're not all the big brands that we hear of. And interestingly, today the whiskeys we'll be tasting are actually from some lesser known distilleries. You may know them, you may have heard them, but the chance to have their malt whiskey, at least here in the States, is just not as common. And I think the Society is, with our goal of really just letting the whiskey do the talking and focusing on casks, regardless of where they came from, but just focusing on flavor. I think it's a good example of why we should recognize, I think, everybody within Speyside and what they're doing. So let's just get into it. I suspect it's going to be a madhouse come 1 o'clock Eastern time, and we're just before that. This is the official debut. What we'll be doing is debuting 2 whiskeys. At least I'll be tasting them right here live. With our selection coming out at 1 p.m., we'll actually be featuring 6. So 2 of them will be the official Spirit of Speyside Society Festival bottlings. And then, just because so many of us are at home, interest in Society whiskey, or really all whiskey as a whole, is through the roof right now, considering we're all dealing with these quarantines, turning to whiskey for our sort of primary activity, responsibly, of course. We've just seen such an uptick in interest from Society members, and I think perhaps you've seen some of our outturn selections have been drying up quicker than usual, some of them within minutes. So we've actually supplemented these 2 celebratory casks with 4 other pretty exciting casks. Now, I don't have those here, but I will reveal those at the end. So going into 1 o'clock Eastern, you'll at least know, what are the 2 festival bottlings, what do they taste like, and then what else is coming along with that. So does that sound good? We'll get into it. Just real quick, I've been following along with the comments while talking, and it's always been tricky now that I'm the only one without my colleagues here to do it. But if you guys have any questions about this, I just see a lot of people in the chat now. Sunday evening Scotch, good to see you. Hey, whiskey folks, he says. Daniel Duggar agrees, gorgeous place for sure. Speyside is a beautiful place. And just show of hands not show of hands, but comment below if you've been to Speyside. Any memories that you'd like to share throughout the discussion, I think that would be pretty appropriate. So let's get into it. Now, the first one is, and I'll show you here if you can see this. Forgive the, I think if it's reversed, and also the lighting is a little bit brash, but this is, I'll put it up here. Cask 36.171 called A Smooth Ride. So you can see this label. This is, our new bottle design with the monogram here, but all the labels feature our festival artwork. So really fun and colorful designs for all of these. You'll see these not just on the Speyside Festival bottlings, but all of them set to be released over the next couple of weeks. And the only, I don't want to say downside, but the one thing you don't see on the label in lieu of the artwork is all the full cask information. But when we do release these, you'll see those on the website, and you can always go to smwsa.com, search the archives for the labels. So pull up all the cask specs and official tasting notes as well. So this is 36.171 called A Smooth Ride. I'll show it one more time. As you can see right here, 22 years old, bottled at 60.5%. And just, I have the full specs here just to share with you. This will be going live on the website soon. But second fill bourbon barrel is the cask type for this 22-year-old, distilled August 1997, bottled at 60.5%. And 68 of these came to the US. So, just as a reference point, very, very limited. There are currently 101 people, with us right now or more. And so in terms of numbers of availability, it's very, very limited. Mind you, we're sharing the outturn of this cask with all different chapters around the world as well. But anyway, let's get into this one. 36.171. Oh, it actually says here, Outturn is one of 144 bottles in the world. So being that we got 78, we actually got just about half of them here in the US, which is pretty exciting. Put this up. So this is a nice little breakfast dram, a smooth ride it's called. And as I mentioned, second fill bourbon barrel, 22 years old. And I should tell you too, just for the hell of it, is the price point. I think that's something that a lot of members have been asking for when we do these live streams. So this one is priced at $180 before shipping and tax. All right, here goes it. And Whiskey Throttle says, it's a great opportunity. We live in North America to actually social distance compared to many other parts of the world. And plus we get to enjoy the whiskey. Yeah, this has certainly been a prime activity for a lot of us, responsibly. Just looking at this, and what I'll do, because it's a celebratory day, I think I'll pour a little bit more. That way when I add water, we can really observe the changes and sort of sense how the character develops. And can you all see this pretty well? I think it's a little, definitely like a sort of a honeysuckle gold type of color. I see the light behind me is probably affecting the color here. So it's tough to tell. Yeah, it's glowing in the glass. But, when it comes to Speyside, I'll just pause before we get into this. Ooh. When it comes to Speyside, you think of what is the actual style of the Speyside region. There's so many different distilleries, and we know when it comes to these styles of regions, we talk about this all the time. Islay, for instance, Island of Islay is known for producing the smoky, peaty type style of Scotch whiskey. Of course, there's some that are not producing that style, but generally that is a characteristic that we all know Islay for embracing. With Speyside, it's a bit tough, in my opinion, and just again, this is me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but. With Speyside, I actually view that there are two styles, and this is one of them. On one hand, you have the more traditional sort of American oak focused spirit, which is lighter in color, lighter in style. And for me, the core profile is like orchard fruit drizzled in honey. There's always a fruity, sort of sweeter style spirits. And then when you can combine that with the American oak maturation, you tend to get some of those vanillins, maybe some like toasted caramel as well. And so that's sort of the classic gentler style. And then on the other hand, you'll have sort of this sherry maturation style, which, spoiler alert, we will get to in a moment. But for now, I just want to call that out and just share that. And I'd love to hear what you guys think, because I always think that there are two styles of Speyside whiskeys. And I think sometimes we tend to know the latter, which is this big sherry style. But this to me is I don't know, maybe perhaps more traditional. So here we go. 60.5% ABV, 22 years old. I'll show it one more time. A smooth ride, 36.171. So right away, and I should mention, I mentioned earlier that I tasted one of these two. This is the one I haven't tasted before. So this will be a real time. So right, okay. This is the attempt at live real-time tasting on YouTube in front of a lot of people. But right away, very aromatic, heavy sort of potpourri elements. Like there's a floral note, but it's the floral note. It's not fresh and vibrant so much as it's more of like a rich and more decadent, intoxicating style of aroma. Really draws you in. It's really nice. A smooth ride. Wow. So very silky texture, very lush. Oh man, but it's prickly. So I'm tasting this neat at 60.5%. So the orchard fruits I mentioned earlier as being sort of a core characteristic of Speyside style are very present. Not on the nose. On the nose was all sort of perfume or sort of a dried potpourri type of aroma. But when you get into it on the palate, I'm going to taste it again, and then I'm going to add some water. But for me, there's a lot going on. But I think it's more subtle. Nothing's jumping out at you. It's not explosive. There's all these different layers that I suspect need to be unpacked with with a few tastings and a bit of water too, but. Steve Kranz asks, hi from Maryland. If we score more than one of these festival releases, any chance of consolidating them for shipping? Yes. I would always say you can call our team and we can always consolidate shipping. We can hold and combine to help you save on the shipping cost. That's always an option. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm trying to address I want to address all your questions. I'll go through them, but I'm also trying to have a first real-time impression of this whiskey. But so as I mentioned, I hinted at, okay, right away, nose, floral, aromatic, decadent, palate, silky, a bit velvety, I think prickly on the back end, but perhaps that's because it was 60.5%. I'm gonna do one more neat taste and then add some water to it. A bit jammy, like a raspberry jam. It's not tart, but it's odd. I'm trying to think how to describe it. It's fruity, but it's not sweet, and it's jammy, but it's not tart. So I think overall it's balanced, as I mentioned earlier. Nothing's really standing out in particular. It's sort of just layers and layers of subtle complexities. But I think I'm gonna add some water here, and I suspect that this will do it some favors. Oh yeah. Right away, just adding just that little dash of water, I think, has really opened up the aroma. Oh yeah. Now the sort of more stone fruits are coming out. Maybe like a hint of pear, and there's like this odd tropical note that comes in, and odd meaning just that it was unexpected, because I didn't get any of that when it was neat. Andrew Newman says raspberry jam and whiskey is usually good in my book. It's not something that's interesting. I'm glad you like that. It's not something that I come across often, but there is a jammy quality to this. But right away, I think just with a dash of water, this is really benefiting right now. So much more complex, and it's just symphonic. It's just wow. Having a moment with this one. Man, it's funny, that dash of water, I think, brings out some of the age, maturity of the spirit. When it was neat at 60.5, was really compact, really intense. But I think with a little bit of water, it's now starting to show signs of an older whiskey. This is, again, 22 years old. It becomes more of a smooth ride with a bit of water. And you know what? I'm actually going to add a little bit more, because it's really, really strong still. And we'll see. I'll probably add a bit more than I tend to enjoy, but just for the sake of observing the evolution of the flavors, let's see what happens here. Sunday Evening Scotch says, having a moment with this one. Yeah, I love those malt moments. I've had a few of those malt moments, by myself here in quarantine recently, and it's always a good thing. Oh man, so that it brings out like a sort of a caramel toffee apple character to it. Oh man, I added I don't know if you saw how much water I added, but it's the second time adding water. I probably added 3 or 4 dashes, and I was afraid that it was actually too much. But in this one, I think the profile has really, really opened up nicely, and it's a smooth ride, and that's what it's called. It's called a smooth ride. But what I think is fun with a smooth ride is, what's that, clear? A lot of times with smooth whiskeys, when we think of smooth whiskey, we also think of sort of low ABV. This is 60.5%. Oh, and it's just like coating my palate around. My gums are literally tingling. 60.5%. It's a smooth ride, not at first, but with a little bit of water, it becomes smoother and smoother. And I know for some of us, smooth is a trait that we look for. For others, I think we don't want smooth. And what I think is nice about this is you actually have the option of having both experiences. Again, this is just first impression with a whiskey. I'm going to go back over the coming days and revisit, of course, and perhaps my pains will change over time. But I appreciate, and I think this is probably what attracted me to the society, just as a member before I was working with the team, is that the opportunity to taste sort of older maturities. This is, again, 22 years old at 60+% ABV is a totally different experience than I think than when you usually get when you buy whiskey off the shelves. Because for most distilleries, when you have a whiskey of this age, they'll cut the strength with water. They'll dilute it down to an ABV that allows them to spread the stock over to more and more bottles. But this is, I enjoy I should say, I appreciate the opportunity to taste a whiskey that has both 20+ years and also at full cask strength. But for me, then adding a bit of water and bringing it down to probably, I'm just speculating, 45% ish. It's more of closer to a commercial bottling strength. Is I think where it really shines. I mean, the profile is really, really just explosive. So just really, there's sort of an old leather flavor that develops, I think, with more and more water. So, oh man, all of a sudden, this busy Tuesday has become a nice little relaxing whiskey dram session. So yeah, so 36.171, a smooth ride. 22 years old, from a second fill bourbon barrel, priced at $180. And yeah, as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that appears to be a rhinoceros. We partnered with a pretty unique artist in Edinburgh to do all of our artwork for our festival bottlings. And you may have seen some of the artwork around before in celebratory bottlings in the recent past, but this one is interesting. The next one's pretty cool too. So sweet, fruity, and mellow is the flavor profile. So for members who track the profiles and obviously like to explore whiskeys within their own palates and in the styles that they intend to enjoy, sweet, fruity, mellow is this one. 22 years, and I think that's a hell of a start. I have to tell you that we're not going to give anything away, but we'll be doing 4 festival celebratory releases beginning today, ending end of next week. And I did a little firing from the hip last night on some of them, and it's going to be good. All right, so good start on that one. Eric Carr says, it's good that I don't work for SMWS. Well, it's not good. I think it's great. It's a great situation. If you're talking about drinking in the morning, I'll say that I rarely do this unless it's for situations like this. But you have to have some sort of discipline. Oh, I'm about to show the bottle. I should probably withhold it. So we just had this sort of old, elegant American oak style of Speyside whiskey, fruity but not too sweet. A lot of vanillins, sort of that. And this one, we picked up a little bit of the old leather because, again, it's 22 years old. I think that's a note that tends to come with older maturities. But now we're moving on to what I think is what I consider the second style of Speyside whiskey, fundamentally different from that one in many, many ways. And that is this one. It's cask 7.233, called A Syrupy Sweet Tale of Romance. If you can tell, this is the red label here. The red flavor profile is what we call our deep, rich, and dried fruits. 13 years old and red. And typically with the deep, rich, and dried fruits, we're looking at heavy, some sort of wine cask maturation, like sherry or red wine, or really anything else that, or sometimes a really recharred or toasted hogshead will give off that really intense cask influence. So our darker spirits. This one in particular is sherry. It's 7.233, 13 years, full term in a first fill Oloroso sherry butt. And this is bottled at 62.3%. So I think right now it's safe to assume that a lot of you are probably hearing this and maybe having a mild freak out. I don't know. I had a freak out when I opened this one yesterday. I did have a chance to taste this because I was really interested to know how this would evolve, just from the first neck pour to being open for a day. But check this out. So first fill ex Oloroso sherry butt, bottled at 62.3%. Sherry butts are considerably larger than barrels, which is what the first one was matured in. And so this is one of 564 bottles in total. I'll just pour this out. You can see the color here. Give me a moment. All right. So I spilled a little bit on the laptop, but that's all right. So you can kind of see here. Now it's interesting because I have this really bright LED light in front of me and then this light in the back. But when I turned those off, it was black. I mean, you can really, it was really opaque. You can barely see through it. But I think with the light, it has more of a reddish hue. And this is full term, as I mentioned, first fill Oloroso Sherry Butt. And I'll do just a little effect here. Let's coat the side of the glass. I actually didn't do this the first time around. And I found if you just coat the inner lining of the glass and then go to nose it. All right. So this is pretty damn good. First tasting note is good. Sorry, guys, it's an 11 a.m. sherry bomb tasting note, and it's a hell of an experience. So it's funny, before I even nose it, I can just smell it coming out of the glass. It's just this big waft of Oloroso sherry. It's nutty and spicy. And if you guys don't know sherry, if you haven't had sherry, I would encourage you all to go out and try it. So much of the flavor profile on this one comes from the sherry. As you can tell here, the color also suggests that the cask and its previous contents, which were sherry, have heavily influenced the spirit. And the whiskey has taken on a lot of the character. And what's interesting, I haven't even tasted this yet, but you can also see, I don't think you can see it here, but from my vantage point, there is sort of like a milky residue on the inner lining of the glass already, which is just speaks to that heavy sherry content. It's just dripping wet. I mean, it's really sort of becoming milky in the glass. Just the resin from the sherry is just coating the glass. And these legs, they're moving so slowly here too. This is such a thick spirit. You can just tell, just based on the movement in the glass, how thick this spirit is. So anyway. So it's 13 years, Speyside, 7.233, called A Syrupy Sweet Tale of Romance. And I think syrup is the first thing we've noticed, right? I mean, it's really just viscous. It's moving so slowly down the glass. And you can kind of just see right here, there's a thick layer of oils on the top. This is obviously non-chill filtered. And it's naturally colored, and it's full cask strength of 62.3%. So let's have a go. So profile is, I think, everything you would dream of with a sherry bomb, and perhaps maybe some more. It's got sort of that baking spices, some cinnamon. The cinnamon is really strong, a bit of nutmeg. But then you get into it. You have the nuttiness like an Oloroso. It's like a macadamia nut type quality. But then I think what I really like, which is the herbal notes of like an Oloroso sherry matured whiskey, which is a lot of clove, maybe like a hint of like sage. I think it gets a bit more exotic than just the typical clove notes. But there's a nice balance, I think, between the Oloroso cask and then the fruity spirit beneath it. Man, but it just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to coat the glass again and then nose it, because when you do that, the aroma is so much more pronounced. So try this at home if you're also having a dram in the morning. Oh yeah, there it is. It's just shooting up the glass. Oh man. It's funny because I've been sitting here waiting for summer for months now in Chicago, and I find myself all of a sudden quarantined at home with the proper sherry bomb, just wanting it to snow for a day. Oh, this is such a cold weather dram. Oh man. All right. Cheers. 62.3%. Yeah, I mean, there was a time when I probably wouldn't enjoy tasting 62.3% neat. You can tell probably by the look at my face that it's a bit much right now. But what I think I'm going to do is step one, add a little bit more, because I feel like this is not going to last that long. But I want to add more whiskey so that I can have more flexibility to add water and sort of observe the changes here. So that was, all right, that was pretty damn good as it is. I know I haven't shared any tasting notes yet, but I do want to add a water to it because I think the prickly nature of the spirit masks a lot of the flavors hidden beneath it. So just give it a moment here. But again, I'm marveling at the fact that there's this milky residue on the whole glass. It's so thick and syrupy. It's just so much fun. I guess, yeah, fellow whiskey geeks, join me in and acknowledging that this can be a lot of fun. Oh, interesting. So I think adding a little bit of water brings out more of the red fruits. It's sort of, we were talking about jam earlier, like a raspberry jam. This one's jammy, sure, but it's a lot of like heavy prunes and raisins, which is interesting because sometimes I get that in Pedro Jimenez sherry. This has a fruity undertone, and it could be from the Speyside spirit beneath it, but there's heavy prunes, raisins, or I think in the UK, as we call it, sultanas or sultanas. I'm sure there's somebody in the UK who can validate that, but raisins, as we call them in the US, and prunes. That nutmeg, the aroma of nutmeg is still there. Like I love the baking spice note, and then combined with the clove. And I think I may have said sage earlier, but there's a unique sort of basil. Like I'm thinking of, it comes in and out, but this odd. Again, I'm saying odd because it's unexpected. It's enjoyable, but sort of like this spaghetti sauce type of note that comes in and out. A bit peppery, like some chili powder. Oh, man. Oh. That's just well, there we have it. So the time is 12:31 p.m. and this is a whiskey moment for the books. This is quite something. Price point. I saw the question on the price point, and forgive me, guys. I've been trying to address comments and view them, but also give the whiskey the respect it deserves. I think, which is some attention. Price on this one is $125. So 13 years, full term, first fill Oloroso sherry. And my God, is that a whiskey? It's big, it's bold, it's boisterous. It's interesting because I tend to reserve this style of whiskey for the winter, but now kind of just being at home and quarantine, weather doesn't really matter. I'm just finding some positives here. Like I appreciate the fact that I have this in my glass right now, because I would normally have this style of whiskey in the back of my, whiskey cupboard. It's actually more like a giant closet, but anyway. So cheers to that one. 7.233. I'll show it again. A CRP sweet tale of romance, complete with a picture of a sloth. And I think sloths are probably right up there with kale as being one of the more popular items of the last 5 years. Kale and, of course, sherry bombs. But the sloth combined with the sherry bomb note, it's just all good fun. I think we as a society don't take ourselves as seriously as some may believe. I think surrounding yourself by amazing whiskey, having it with friends, shared in good company is always a great time, and having a good laugh with a nice little sloth is a refreshing take on this one. So yeah, 7.233 is the second festival bottling for today, and this is a proper sherry bomb. And I'll comment one last thing on this particular whiskey. And when it comes to the style of sherry bombs, the sherry bomb is unofficially, I think, what you'll hear thrown around, describing a full-term sherry matured, really bold, sort of cask-driven spirit. Oftentimes they come from Speyside, but not always. As I mentioned, I think that is one of two classic styles of the region. But a lot of them in recent years are younger, sub 10 years and whatnot. And really, when you have a big sherry bomb, you can get a lot out of youthful whiskey, which I appreciate. This is a bit unique, though. 13 years, I think, is older for that style. And sometimes when you go beyond 13 years, it can be too much. And again, not always. I've had 25, 30, 40-year-old sherry bombs that have really developed nicely. But a lot of times when you get closer to 20 years, between 13 and 20 years, just on average, the cask can overpower. So you have to be careful because it can overpower the spirit. This is at that unique place, and I think pulled at the right moment in which the spirit is in good harmony with the cask. But the cask, let's be honest here, has a full presence here. I mean, the fact that we have this milky film around the glass just goes to show that how influential the sherry is to the whiskey. So Tom R asked the question of when are these bottles going to be available? Yes, and Sunday Evening Scotch has answered that in 25 minutes, approximately 1 p.m. Eastern time, they will be released. Of this one, I should mention too. 7.233. There will be just 90 bottles in the US, and actually you can call it 89 because this is one of the 90 we had open for research and sharing with all of you. But in the other one, as I mentioned, so 90 bottles one, and the first one 6.7, there will be 78 bottles minus one, 77 in the US. And just a note on that, I think obviously we can do the math. We have 139 viewing right now. Presuming a lot of our members, it's a very, very limited stock. So what we've done, in addition to releasing more festival bottlings from the various regions, starting today and then commencing on Thursday, then the following Tuesday, and then the following Thursday. So Tuesday and Thursday, this week and next week, we'll be releasing our festival bottlings. But in addition to these, we're releasing 4 others from Speyside that we had intended to release later in the year, but just based on the growing interest from society members who are at home and just watching the speed at which our casks are drying up, within minutes after release, we wanted to at least help support by bringing up more and more casks for you to get your hands on. So I'll read these off. I don't have these in front of me, but just to give you an idea of what they are, I'll run through them real quick. Again, these are dropping in less than 25 minutes now. So in addition to these 2, we have cask 9.174. called Strawberry Jalapeno Ice Cream. I should mention these. So these casks do not bear the festival artwork labels. They are our new sort of standard labels with all the information and whatnot on them. Apologies, I don't have them here. We're just trying to reserve as many of these bottles for members as possible. So that the third one in addition to these 2 is cask 9.174 called Strawberry Jalapeno Ice Cream. Kind of a peculiar name, but let's see. 15 years old, obviously from Speyside as well. Distilled in 2004, 55%. And this was a double matured whiskey that spent 13 years in an ex-bourbon hogshead and then transferred to a first fill charred red wine barrique. So that's priced at $125. So cask 9.174. If you're jotting notes, you'll see them go out there in the wild in almost 20 minutes now. 15-year-old on that one. And then we're moving on to cask 35.248, which is in the old and dignified profile. This is a 23-year-old from Speyside that has also been double matured, 22 years in ex-bourbon barrel, and then transferred to a first fill ex-Sauterne barrique. So Sauterne is a lovely, lovely style of French dessert wine, very, very sweet, sort of a white wine. One of my favorites for whiskey maturation. And I think it's very tricky to use. So these finishing for a shorter period of time, I think just creates an amazing profile. So that's 23 years in total. It's cask 35.248. The name, forgive me, I didn't mention the name earlier. The name is Eclectic Equilibrium. I love that name. That'll be coming out along with these others. Then we move on to cask 1.218, which is in the spicy and dry profile. Dessert Tripic Hessian Meringue, which is an interesting name. Dessert Tripic, and forgive me if I believe it's Greek for style of painting, but it's let's kind of go into it for a second. So 10 years old, also from Speyside, in a refill Oloroso sherry butt. And a big butt, it looks like, at that, 63.7%, and it's priced at $110. I suspect, again, not having the whiskey in front of me, but what we see here with our flavor profiles, this is the spicy and dry one. Typically, when you have and then this is an Oloroso butt. This is also an Oloroso butt, first fill, meaning it's a fresher cask, and it's in the deep, rich, and dried fruits profile, this red label. The spicy and dry is the label, it's the yellow color coding. And typically with those, when you see sherry butt and you see spicy and dry, just a little society pro tip, that tells me that the cask influence is probably not as intense as this, meaning they'll produce a lighter spirit. And it could be dark, but the flavor itself determines the classification for the flavor profile. So I'm suspecting that that's probably lighter on the sherry influence. So if the heavy sherry influence is not your thing, that's probably a lighter take on that. And then the last one, number 6, is 85.57, clean and attractive, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. Juicy oak and vanilla flavor profile. That's the blue, one of the blue color codings. That's a 13-year-old from 2006. Bottled at 59.6%, also from a refill American oak hog set. So, and that's priced at $105. And so a really, really good variety, all different styles of all Speyside whiskeys, but we have a good variety of American oak, then we have sherry oak, and then we also have, in one case, Sauternes Barrique, which is, French dessert wine. And we also have first fill charred red wine, presumably also from French oak as well, from France. So really, really good makeup of all different styles, flavor profiles, and cask types from Speyside, of course. So, and let's do a quick rundown. So on the pricing again, first one that we tried, 36.171, which is a smooth ride. This is a 22-year-old priced at $180. Then we moved on to 7.233. I love the name. A syrupy sweet tale of romance with the sloth, which I'm quite a fan of. And that's priced at $125. Cask 9.174. Strawberry jalapeno ice cream is $125 as well. That's the 15-year-old finished in a charred red wine barrique. And then 35.248 eclectic equilibrium. Have a few drams and then say that one 5 times fast. That's the one that's finished in first fill Sauternes Barrique. That's priced at $235 for the 23-year-old. Cask 1.218 is the 10-year-old from a refill Oloroso butt, priced at $110, and then 85.57 clean and attractive, 13 years old in a refill hogshead, priced at $105. And by refill hogshead in this case, by default, we presume American oak if it's not otherwise specified. So that's the full list, dropping in less than 20 minutes now. A couple notes on that as I just sip this one until it's done. Quick note, obviously we have a lot of members eager to kind of explore these whiskeys, very, very limited supply. We'll be coming back in the coming days, obviously, with other festival bottlings from the different regions. This should be the only one that I'm by myself for. I'll be joined by my colleagues moving forward, and we'll have multiple opinions on these whiskeys. But, just a quick, if you're ordering online, starting at 1 o'clock, again, now we're less than 20 minutes. Just a quick note. When you add an item to your cart, it doesn't guarantee the bottle is yours until you check out. So it is a bit of a free-for-all, and our apologies on that. It's just kind of unusual circumstance with so many people in tune right now to the whiskeys and the outturn releases. But so something to keep in mind, if those are the 6 whiskeys that are coming out today, if you're interested in any of those and you now have the price points and all the specs, I would just suggest sort of check out as quickly as you can. You can also call our team line. We will be answering the phones. However, just based on the volume, I can't guarantee that we'll be answering them all at the same time. So it might be best to try online. And so I would just move quickly if you'd like that. But if you don't get one of these today, fear not. We have some fantastic whiskeys coming out in the coming days. Commencing again here on Thursday, we'll have a few casks for the Highland Festival on Thursday. And then next week, we'll get more into the coastal styles. We'll have Campbelltown Malts Festival release on the following Tuesday, which is the 19th, I believe. And then concluding on the 21st of May with Feshil, which is the Islay Festival. And we have a whole selection of Islay whiskeys, peated, non-peated. Actually, I think that most of them actually in this case are all peated, but we'll get into that in a bit, and I'm excited for that as well. So that's that. If you have any questions, shoot us a note, info@smwsa.com. Drop a comment, below. This video will be reposted again once we end the broadcast. And so it's about 15 minutes to go live now. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're excited as I am for these whiskeys, and we'll be coming back here in a couple of days. All right.